Bring in now Executive Council of Australian Jury Co-Chief Executive Alex Rivchin. Alex, I mean, of course, we've got to acknowledge the fact that this was done at a music festival, and a music festival was where October 7 started. I mean, you could fail to be much more offensive than this.
You're right, Caleb. I mean, it's incredible. The fact that these people could have so little historical awareness, so little compassion, that at a music festival, when, as you said, almost 400 Israelis were butchered dancing at a festival, now they're using their festivals to preach hatred and chant for death. And it's just extraordinary. It's as though this is a Hezbollah rally in downtown Beirut and not a music festival in Somerset. The fact that people would be compelled and like sheep go along with these chants by these, little known artists who are trying to drum up attention, calling for death to people. But this is what happens when you deal with fanatics, and fanatics have a characteristic of them that they eventually reveal who they are. And this movement, which really swelled post-October 7, it began by calling for ceasefires as though it wanted peace and was anti-war. They very quickly dropped that and turned to donning their keffiyehs and chanting for Palestine. Then they started cheering on Iranian rockets and Houthi drones. And now they've gone a step even further. Now they're openly calling for death. This is what they are. And it's not merely Glastonbury. The same chant was heard on the streets of Melbourne just last night. So this is something that's with us in our society and around the world. And until we see serious consequences, commercial consequences, criminal consequences, this is going to go on and on and on.
And this is the thing that it just gets me, is that the crowd was just shouting it back, seemingly not even thinking about it. I mean, I find it hard to believe that you could get such a large group of people together who all feel the same way about that thing, but like sheep, as you say, in that circumstance, they just shout it back as though it has no meaning, as though it's just a normal thing to say. I mean, do they think it's edgy, or has it just seeped into the culture now that is an entirely acceptable thing to shout at a music festival?
Well, look, we know from history that when you have a mob, a large group of people, and you kind of shed personal responsibility and you take on anonymity and you can behave in a totally different way, you get swept up. And even if you don't necessarily hold those views, even if you didn't come into that crowd intending to chant death towards a group of people, you get swept away. And we saw it with Nazis. We saw it with, Klan rallies. It's that same sort of group dynamic where people take on the ideology of sometimes a small minority of people, of fanatics. And that's what we're seeing here. But whether it's a lot of people that support this or a small minority, everyone who stood there waving those flags and going along with those chants bears personal responsibility. We're responsible for our own actions and our own conduct. And they could have booed, they could have shown displeasure with it, but they didn't. They were either silent or they went along with it. And I think that reveals something really nasty about the crowd there, but also wider society. The apathy, the complicity, the moral fog, the unwillingness of people to see evil for what it is and to stand up to it.
Indeed. Now, of course, after successfully ending the war between Israel and Iran, the US president is now pushing for Israel and Hamas to have a ceasefire. He posted on Truth Social, make the deal in Gaza, get the hostages back. And this was him over the weekend saying he thinks that a deal could be imminent.
I think it's close. I just spoke with some of the people involved. It's a terrible situation that's going Gaza he's asking about. And we think within the next week we're going to get a ceasefire.
Alex, wishful thinking or potential reality?
Look, it's difficult to know. I mean, the president has said similar things early on, and, he pledged upon taking office to bring the war to a close, and that's been elusive. And he's applied diplomatic pressure. As we saw with Iran, he can show US power in very extravagant, spectacular ways. But when you're dealing with a foe like Hamas, which is, psychologically unstable in their calculations, which wants death over life, which will yield up its own civilians to pursue its propaganda aims, it's difficult to know how they can be compelled to actually release the hostages and end this war and surrender unconditionally. They're not a conventional fighting force that accepts defeat and moves on. So it's difficult to see how this plays out, but we know that we've gotten to where we've gotten through power and through a demonstration of Israeli force. And, the attention has shifted somewhat from that theatre of war. We've been focused on what's happening in Iran. But every day, Israelis are fighting bravely and they're falling in combat. Every day, the hostages remain in captivity in the most hellish circumstances imaginable. And we fight for them and we pray for them and we hope they'll be home soon. And we hope that this war does end. But I think it will take the complete dismantlement of Hamas to a point where they see no way out and will either accept surrender or exile for their leadership. I think that's the only way we'll get to a conclusion here.
Just finally, New South Wales Liberal MP Anthony Roberts, his office was vandalised over the weekend. Some pathetic lowlife was seen on CCTV footage allegedly spitting on the glass at the front of the office before writing F Israel. I mean, for goodness sake, I thought we'd given up on this stuff a while ago, but there are still dopes running around doing it, Alex.
Look, I think pathetic lowlife is an apt characterisation of this sort of individual, someone who's so filled with hatred and is so petty and looking for their own emotional nourishment that they would spit on an electorate office, on an inanimate object, and vandalise it in this way. But it's criminal conduct. And, you know, in this instance, I'm less concerned for the Jewish community. We've put up with a great deal more than this. We've dealt with fire bombings and boycotts and what's happening to our brethren in Israel. But I'm concerned more for the state of our democracy, because this is another act which I think dissuades Australians from participating in our democracy and running for public office. I mean, who would want to put themselves in the firing line of people like that? And, you know, John Howard once said that politics was the only game in town, but I think increasingly people will look at this sort of thing and think, you know, I'll do something else with my life. And ultimately, it's our representative democracy that suffers for it.
Indeed, Alex Rivshin, thank you for joining me. And I'll give you a tip as well. If you think vandalising an MP's office is going to change anything, mate, you are so stupid. Just give it up.